Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about the Arcanum experience point system, the design behind it, and how it's kind of contentious. It was to the dev team back in the day, and players today still talk about it, so let's dive into it. This actually comes from a question from blah 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 v blah, who asked, can you talk about the experience system in Arcanum? I'm not sure there's another game with similar displacement of XP, being mostly on a per hit basis with a pretty minor emphasis on the per kill points. This makes most solo builds very strong, but politician characters that collect a lot of followers or mages that specialize in summoning get very little experience. What was your design philosophy here? It's a good question. Let me start by saying the source of XP in role-playing games has always been contentious and still is. There's a lot of discussion about where XP should come from in a game. I talked about that in general. I had a video called Experience Points and Level Progression. I'll link it below. And just so you know, the decision I've come up with, so I'll tell you now how I'll finish up the video. I've decided that quest completion giving experience points is the answer. And that's how I like to give experience points. There's a video on that. Combat, giving experience points for combat always makes me go, what about the non-combat characters? Like OP asked. And if you want to give XP for skill use, that causes a whole bunch of issues. I do not want to rehash them. I made a video specifically on skill-based XP. It just leads to issues, and you have to solve them. If you think it's a solution and you don't solve those other problems that solution just introduced, I think you're doing a major disservice to your design. Anyway, watch those videos. I'm not going to rehash them here. What I'm going to talk about is Arcanum, why it was that way, and maybe what I do in the future. So when we were making Arcanum, I chose quests as a major source of XP. In fact, quests were supposed to be the major source of experience points, items, reputation change, everything like that. But there were a lot of people on the team who wanted combat to give experience points, despite my arguments that we supported a lot of builds that were non-combat oriented. And how were they supposed to get experience points? The arguments that they tended to give were, first of all, there were some builds that couldn't get a lot of the quests. Either their intelligence was really low, or they had a bad reputation, so the quests just weren't available for them. Only the main story quests were guaranteed for everyone. They also pointed out that combat was frequently unavoidable. Random encounters in the wilderness, the way some dungeons were set up, there was no path through the dungeon where you didn't have to fight something. Although, I always thought you could sneak by them, but they would say, no, that's not always possible. Okay. Also, since the player could get companions, they could still avoid combat by just having the companions do the fighting. So that was already something that was possible. And then they argued for a source of XP that did not come from quests, either for just grinding, like, you're close to going up a level, let me go grind some XP just so I can go up. Or they still wanted to be able to advance when they finished all the non-story quests. Notice that this is an option. If you finish all the story quests, Arcanum is over. Arcanum is over when you finish the last story quest. But if you did all the non-story quests, that meant there was no XP available anymore unless you did the story quests and therefore ended the game. They wanted a source of XP that wasn't quests. So we talked about it and I thought about it. And what I ended up adding was 2 more sources of XP. One, every time you scored a hit, and there's XP relative to the amount of damage you did. Or you could view it as XP relative to the amount of, hit points you took away from the monster. Same thing. And XP for landing the killing blow. Saying whoever killed them got it was like 20% of the entire combat XP pool was awarded to the killing blow. So this meant that players who made their companions do all the fighting, they didn't get the combat XP. If the companions did all the hits and the killing blow, they didn't get any combat XP. This was identical to a stealth character who may have avoided fighting altogether by sneaking around that combat encounter. because both of these are just ways of avoiding fighting. Whether you avoided combat altogether or you had your companions do it all, you avoided fighting. And this meant the result of this was the pure fighter with no companions would rise in level the fastest because they'd get all the quest XP and they got all the combat XP. Well, the other team developers argued to me that this made sense because stealth and magic and companions all made the game easier. So that companionless pure fighter was already kind of playing on hard mode. So he got to rise a little faster. So I did it. That's what I did. I added it. I've frequently let developers convince me to change features. I talk about the Fallout ending all the time. It wasn't my idea. It was Leonard Boraski's, and it was a good one, and it made the game better. I've had lots of other examples of ways people convinced me to change a game feature, and the game got better. It's a team made game after all. And while I don't like design by committee, I don't like design dictators either. I think there's a happy middle where you listen to other people for their ideas, but ultimately you chose, and I chose. By the way, that doesn't mean I always like new features that people add, and especially in Arcanum, I talk about the 1-point system where everything costs a point, a character point. I did not like it. I have a whole video about this. I thought it was a bad change that I was convinced to make. This combat XP, kind of similar. Although I can't say back then. Back then I'm like, oh, okay, let's do that. Now, no. Moving on past Arcanum, when I make games now, I like the quest to be the only source of XP. It means the game is very agnostic about how you solve quests. Did you sneak through it? Did you talk your way through it? Did you fight everything? Did you completely avoid that area altogether? The game doesn't care. If you got the quest done, here's your XP. They don't care what you did. Also, because most of my games don't have post-end content, the game is over when the story ends. I didn't have to worry about having that extra source of grind XP. Because of this, let me just say that there's a bigger meta lesson here. Don't let people convince you that to be a good designer, you have to get all your philosophy set in stone and then do everything like that going forward. You will change your mind. You will evolve your philosophy. My philosophy changed over 45 years of game design. Only closed-minded people don't change their minds. Don't be one of those people. So this Arcanum experience point system is a good example of I really wanted it to be XP. I was convinced not to, and I really was convinced. I thought it was a good idea. If I were to remake Arcanum now, or an Arcanum-like game, I'd go back to a experience only from quests. Anyway, I hope that answered your question. Blah, 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 v blah.